And maybe it might be helpful to give you some examples of different types of middle circle behaviors. One example I just gave would be, someone who's goes to bookstore and it looks at pornography there. Well, just going to the bookstore puts that person in a place where they can get in trouble. It's part of their ritual or part of their pattern. So going to the bookstore by themselves would be middle circle behavior. I think a common pattern for a lot of people is if they're surfing on the computer, looking at the internet at night by themselves, that would be middle circle behavior because that oftentimes gets them in trouble. I've worked with people who, have a home office and they maybe do some work in their home office periodically. And if they go on the internet in their home office, going on the internet, doing stuff on the internet is part of their pattern of acting out. That's probably part of their middle circle. I think for some people, surfing around on television, surfing through channels, flipping around channels on TV, I think again, one of the keys would be if you're doing that by yourself, if you're watching TV by yourself, flipping around on channels, a lot of times what's happening is you're thinking about, you're kind of even subconsciously maybe looking for things that are stimulating for you or somehow sexually charged. That would be middle circle behavior. What about behaviors, or what about interactions with other people? Flirting kinds of behaviors. For many of us, that's a key thing to distinguish when normal friendliness is moving into unhealthy flirting. And so one way of thinking about that would be, crossing the line and being more friendly than you need to be with members of the opposite sex. It's one thing to talk with a server in a restaurant. It's another thing to start asking questions about, where they're from and those kinds of things. You're getting into being more friendly than you need to be, which is probably a sign of starting to engage in flirting behaviors. We'll all have sexual thoughts that pop into our minds. We'll have, we might think of those like pop-ups on the, on internet, pop-up ad. Well, we have those pop-ups that come into our minds. That's one thing. But when we start to let ourselves drift in those fantasies, letting those fantasies spin in our minds, we would say that doing that is middle circle behavior, letting ourselves, sit with fantasies. Oftentimes, if we do that, then that's going to lead us to masturbation, or that's going to lead us even to other forms of acting out or inner circle behaviors. Middle circle behaviors don't just involve sexual things, though. For example, harboring resentment towards our spouse, if we're married, oftentimes is part of what leads us into acting out. If our spouse says or does something that makes us angry, makes us, hurts our feelings, instead of dealing with that, instead of sort of processing that with them, we just stuff that down. And then later, some of these hurts build up, and then later, if we're tempted, well, now we have kind of an excuse or justification. Look at how they've hurt me, and then that resentment becomes the fuel for acting out later. I think another pattern of acting out for people is if they get super, super busy and stressed and overwhelmed. Going through times of overwork can be part of our middle circle because we let ourselves get super depleted, and then we're looking for some kind of relief or some kind of solution. So then we turn to sexual activity. So maybe a middle circle behavior would be overwork or going on, crazy work schedules. For some people, traveling is part of their lives and becomes a challenge for them. Here's an important distinction, because if you're engaging in business travel, sometimes you don't have control over that. So it's hard to think about that as like a behavior that you have to be accountable for because it's just what you're forced to do. But maybe another way of thinking about it would be to say, if I'm on a business trip, if I'm traveling without having a plan, without engaging in some kind of a plan to deal with the temptations, that would be middle circle behavior for me. Like if I'm going out on a business trip and I don't tell anybody, any of my friends, I'm not in contact with my sponsor or whatever, that would be middle circle because I'm isolating. In fact, you might even just simply put down isolating behaviors as part of what would be middle circle. If you stop going to meetings, if you stop making phone calls, any form of isolation, kind of cocooning a little bit, would be middle circle. Okay, then the third circle represents positive things. So if the inner circle is the red and the middle circle is yellow because that's danger, warning, the outer circle is green because those are the positive things that we do that help us be healthy, help us get out of our isolation, and help us stay away from our addiction. It would be things like going to meetings, doing our spiritual habits, doing recovery readings in this program, doing a little something every day for our recovery. That's outer circle behavior because that puts us in a place of emotional and spiritual health and helps us stay away from our addiction. Another thing would be physical activities, exercise, engaging in hobbies, things that are personally renewing for us, doing things that build our relationship with our spouse, intimate conversations, talking about things that are deeply important to us, having date nights, engaging in healthy sexuality, be part of our outer circle. For a lot of people, the experience of addiction and the busyness of life, responsibilities of life pile up, sort of crowd out the things in our lives that are personally renewing. It's not uncommon for people to really have lost touch with the things that were enjoyable and renewing to them. So part of recovery involves sort of recapturing the things that are sort of healthy ways to have fun, healthy ways to restore one's soul. So maybe picking up some hobby, some pastime, some form of recreation that is restorative to you can be part of this. I would also include here just hanging out with friends, developing friendships, doing things with the guys would be outer circle behaviors. So if you can see this, the outer circle has a lot of space, lots of things to write down. A number of different spheres of life are touched on here. And the idea is you want to have a variety of tools, so to speak, that enable you to be healthy and whole. So as you look at this three-circle plan now, you see an overview. In the center, there's a specific, discrete list of things that you're committing to abstain from that represent acting out or represent breaking sobriety. And to do that, you also have this middle circle of behaviors that when you engage in them, they get you in trouble. They pull you into the pattern. And so the pathway of recovery then is involving creating a life where you're filling your life with the outer circle behaviors and paying special attention to those middle circle things. And you create boundaries around that so that keeps you out of the inner circle. One example would be, let's say that a lot of ways you've gotten in trouble in the past is staying up late at night, being on the computer when your spouse is in bed, and then surfing through pornography or chat rooms or whatever, and acting out. So if that's part of the pattern, one of the things is to be like outer circle behavior would be exercising, engaging in a regular pattern of work and rest and sleep, having some positive things that you're doing so that you're not just sitting around on the computer if you're not working. And then in terms of middle circle, one of the behaviors that you're doing that's getting you in trouble is being on the computer when your spouse is in bed. So you would identify that as a boundary or as a guideline. I'm not going to do that. And if I do that, that means I'm engaging in middle circle behaviors. So who do you talk to about this stuff? We would say for sure your spouse wants to know and needs to know whether or not you're sober. And so it's part of our commitment in recovery in a relationship, if we're married, that we be checking in with our spouse on a regular basis about what's happening with our sobriety. And then in terms of middle circle behaviors, we want to be checking in with somebody about that. Maybe not our spouse. It may be just not helpful to be talking about things we're thinking about and fantasies we're having or whatever. Some of that stuff might just be unhelpful for our spouses to have to be exposed to on a regular basis. But they want to know and they need to know that we're doing what we need to do for our recovery. So they need to know that we're talking with somebody about that. And that's what our groups are for. That's what our recovery friends or accountability partners and our sponsors are for. So that we have somebody that we're checking in with about, these are the things that are going on for me in terms of my middle circle behaviors. And then again, with your spouse, checking in about your inner circle. And if you're in any kind of recovery program, part of what the group meetings are about is to check in about your sobriety. So you're checking in about your sobriety for sure in your groups, hopefully also middle circle, and then checking with your spouse about inner circle. So that's a 3-circle plan. Think about that as a way of looking at recovery. I would also encourage you to talk to your spouse about this if you guys are able to have helpful conversations about recovery. Talk to your sponsor or to people in your group. This is important for you to have clarity about for yourself, but also to get input from other people, because other people might be able to point out things that you may not have thought about. They may be able to point things out that you hadn't seen. And in terms of the husband and wife relationship, talking about this, I think, just helps you get on the same page together. So you might consider doing that, and blessings to you in this.